Hello and welcome to a Facebook Live with BBC News. Our topic of the day is really the topic of the day, North Korea and its nuclear weapons development. My name is Celia Hatton. I am the Asia Pacific Regional Editor in the BBC Newsroom. I cover all of Asia Pacific, but as I was just telling my two colleagues who've joined me today, really, I'm only covering North Korea today. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Can you tell us who you are and what your chosen area of expertise is?
My name is Emil Dahl. I'm a research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute at RUSI here in London, a defence security think tank. I work on North Korea issues and specifically sanctions.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Emil. And Nicola, what about you?
So I'm Dr. Nicola Leveringhouse. I'm a lecturer in East Asian security at King's College London in the Department of War Studies, and I work primarily on Chinese security and foreign policy issues, but also nuclear weapons issues in the region.
Fantastic. So we have a lot of expertise in this room. And please send us your questions on Facebook. I'm going to be looking at the phone I've got here at what you've got to say. And but we'll start the conversation off, I think, with you, Nicola. We had a brief conversation earlier, and I think we were talking about the idea that a lot of players in the region are resisting the acceptance of the idea that North Korea is becoming a nuclear state.
I think so. I think generally in the region, the governments are still kind of thinking, perhaps wishful thinking, that North Korea's program can be rolled back. And I really think we've kind of crossed that point now, and mindsets need to change, most definitely. Yeah.
And Emil, what do you think? If we can come to this acceptance, if we just take what North Korea is saying at face value, that it does have that it has miniaturized a nuclear warhead, that it can put on an intercontinental ballistic missile, what does that mean really, and how does that change the facts on the ground?
Well, I completely agree with what Nicola just said. I think we do need to move past this sort of denuclearization debate and thinking that we can roll back the program. But I don't think that means there's a difference between accepting the fact that North Korea has nuclear weapons and engaging with them on that premise. That doesn't necessarily mean legitimizing the regime or the Kim ruling family. What we need to do is acknowledge that they have this capability and start engaging with them on that premise, absolutely.
Okay, but do you think if we do say to Kim Jong-un and the people around him, okay, we accept that you have this capability, we're not going to question that anymore, do you think that would bring tensions down? Do you think that the North Koreans would relax to a certain extent on that topic?
I don't think they would relax, but it's certainly a condition for talks to restart from their perspective. So, like Emil said, for the sake of diplomacy and engagement, I think that acknowledgement needs to be made. Of course, a lot of Western diplomats are very apprehensive about doing that for precisely the reasons that Emil said. But I think, again, you just have to be pragmatic on this point, and it's more about engagement in diplomacy, which frankly isn't really being attempted at all at the moment, which is astonishing, really.
I mean, Emil, I think that the Chinese really have been making the point again and again that they want to get all the players around the table again. What do you think about this?
Well, I think China's been saying for a long time now that we don't stand alone in this and we don't hold all the pieces to make this puzzle that is solving the North Korean crisis. They've been saying consistently that the US has to offer something as well. The US has to be willing to enter into negotiations and offer things like the military exercises that they conduct with South Korea, put those things on the table. For the Chinese, yes, they've been willing to sign up to sanctions. We've yet to see how they implement those. But for the Chinese, they also feel that the United States and President Trump needs to engage more seriously in a diplomatic effort.
Nicola, what do you think about what Emil's just said? What do you think about the Chinese stance on this?
I mean, I've spoken to a lot of Chinese experts over the summer about this. And I've been working on this topic since 2003, and I think their stance has been very consistent. They're pretty fed up with North Korea, and that's just kind of increased over time. Their relationship is not a close one, it's not a good one. It's not probably as bad as some people think, but it's not a good, happy relationship. And I think they feel that it is now time for the United States, so I would agree with Emil, to do something other than just talk hot air, which is essentially what the US administration has been doing. And of course there's been some silly talk about trade and punitive measures against China. Again, that doesn't help the situation. I mean, maybe we can talk about this, maybe there'll be some questions about this later, but domestic politics in China is also very important here. And there's obviously a big event happening soon in October. And Xi Jinping does not want to get tainted at all, right, by any of all this, fuss over North Korea and its relationship with the United States.
It's interesting as you say this. We have a question coming in from Robert. He says, no one is going to invade North Korea, but what are the world's choices? China says one thing and does another. They are the key player here, aren't they? Who wants to pick that up?
Yes and no. I want to pick up on the military options piece. Because we all know that any military option on the peninsula would be devastating for both sides. It would be devastating for North Korea, but it would also be devastating for US allies in the region. No one wants to see that scenario. And Kim Jong-un knows that. President Trump hopefully knows that. China's enforcement of sanctions has been lax so far, but we have to remember that they've only just signed up to the harshest sanctions ever last month. And we have to give them the benefit of the time to see, can they actually implement this? How serious are they about solving the sanctions implementation side of the North Korean issue?
Emil, when you and I were speaking before, I had pointed out that, if you do look at China's import and export figures, North Korea doesn't publish those figures, but China's figures, we do see that China has been taking some steps. They've stopped the importation of North Korean coal, which has really, hurt the North Korean economy to a certain extent. And it seems that they've also stopped supplying North Korea with gasoline, which seems like it could be quite an important resource for the North Koreans. What do you think about that? Does it seem that the North Koreans are taking some steps?
I mean, so just on the implementation side again, and the petroleum point, yes, but there's a difference sometimes between official figures that comes out of the Chinese government and what's actually happening. So sometimes you can still see ships coming and going, very much loaded. But is North Korea feeling the strain of sanctions? Well, they stand to lose quite a lot if China fully implements this. But North Korea has many, many partners. It's not just China. There's also Russia that has been ongoing with its relationship with North Korea, both in terms of trade and also in diplomacy. And a host of other countries, many African nations have quite strong links, historical links with North Korea. So we're not just talking about China here. We're talking about the whole world having to do more on sanctions implementation.
Okay, let's look for another question from our Facebook audience. Edward has a comment. He says, are the North Koreans developing nuclear artillery or just missiles? And then he also says, are the North Koreans sharing their nuclear knowledge with other countries? Either one of you want to pick that up?
I mean, they're developing, they say they're developing a hydrogen bomb, right? That's what they've tested, and they're developing missile technology since the 1990s. They've been interested in the bomb and missile technology since at least the 1950s and 1960s. So this is a long-standing program. There's no surprises there. What was the second? I can't remember now.
He says, are the North Koreans sharing their...
Oh, right.
Their nuclear knowledge with other countries? That's a good question.
That's one of the big problems with North Korea and why its proliferation is such a problem, right, for not just the region but the world, because we do have some evidence of smuggling networks and the illegal transfer of sensitive technology between North Korea and other countries, right? So that is definitely a problem, that if North Korea does go further down the path, it can then become, this major supplier, as it were, for other countries that are eager. I mean, you can think of Iran and others, perhaps, that might want to, in the future, seek nuclear weapons capability. So that's a big problem. It's not simply whether, the Second Korean War will break out or how it will affect Japan and China, which are all very valid and very legitimate concerns, but it's also about this proliferation aspect that is, I guess, a more geeky problem, but it's a big problem too.
Actually, it's interesting you touch on that point, though, the concerns that the North Korean weapons buildup in itself might lead to the outbreak. I mean, here we've got a comment from Hakan. He says, World War is coming. But then again, we have another comment from Prakash. He says, North Korea has said, we will retaliate if our country is harmed. we will never attack first. So differing views there on how close we are to some kind of outbreak of violence. What do you think, Camille?
I don't think nuclear war is imminent, and I think that's absolutely vital to stress. But I do think that we need to manage our responses. When we have provocations from North Korea like this, we need to make sure us, as in the US and the US partners, need to make sure that anything that we do in reaction to a North Korean provocation doesn't damage the situation further, doesn't escalate the situation further. So I think it is manageable, but I do think when you have a president that seems to tweet out policy options, you can become worried that that war and that escalatory ladder from just doing provocative missile tests to actual nuclear war, that ladder becomes a lot shorter. You can worry that. But I think also that President Trump is surrounded by some very good policy people in his National Security Council who will be advising on exactly this issue.
I mean, I would just add quickly to that, I mean, from North Korea's perspective, it's still at war. So this idea of there being another war it doesn't quite ring true, right? I mean, obviously, sitting here in London, we don't feel that way, right? But in Pyongyang and other places in North Korea, they feel that the war never ended. So this is just another kind of escalation ladder for them. It's nothing particularly new. And of course, if you're in South Korea and Seoul, where I was recently, for them it's par for the course. You know, they're used to these threats. It's not actually anything particularly new. What's been new is the threats directed so clearly at Washington and Washington's quite bold reaction back.
And I mean, just really quickly, this is deterrence, right? So North Korea has been studying how the US and other nuclear powers have been doing deterrence communications over the years. And deterrence is having a credible nuclear capability. And that's exactly what the North Koreans are doing right now.
Okay. Very good points from Emil and Nicola. Thank you so much to you both. And I'm Celia Hatton. Thank you for joining us for this Facebook Live on BBC News. Bye-bye.